Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Cinematic Excrement, now gluten-free. And once again, we find ourselves in the midst of superhero fever with the release of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. And what a shock! It wasn't all that great. Now, I know there are some of you out there who enjoyed the movie, and if you are one of those people, that is fine. Go right ahead and enjoy it. I don't know what y'all saw in it, but to each his own, or her own as the case may be. I am not a fan, but I will say this, it is still far from the worst Superman movie I have ever seen. That honor, or dishonor, depending on how you look at it, goes to Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, which I reviewed about 3 years ago when Man of Steel hit theaters, and boy was it an absolute mess. This time around, I could certainly review another Superman movie, it's not like I don't have enough material to choose from, but since The Dark Knight is also part of Dawn of Justice, I think it's time we took a look at a terrible Batman movie. Especially since I've been getting requests to review this particular movie for years. So today, we're gonna tear into Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin. This was the fourth movie in the original Batman film franchise, and due to the film's overwhelmingly negative reception, it also ended up being the last. I, for one, am not surprised, as Batman and Robin was a spectacular train wreck from top to bottom. But before we dive into this steaming pile of bat guano, let's take a look at how we got here. It all started in 1989 with the release of Batman, directed by Tim Burton, and starring Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne, billionaire playboy by day, crime-fighting vigilante by night. Here he goes to war with the sinister criminal known as the Joker, played by Jack Nicholson. Unlike the extremely campy Batman TV show of the 1960s, which was perfectly fine for what it was, this was a darker, more serious Batman. And in my opinion, it was pretty awesome. Keaton turned out to be a pretty good Batman, Nicholson was fucking amazing as the Joker, and the film sported a unique visual style that only Tim Burton could have brought to the big screen. Top it off with a memorable score from Danny Elfman, and you've got yourself one kick-ass superhero movie. And audiences thought the same thing, as Batman brought in a ridiculous amount of money. Naturally, the powers that be at Warner Brothers were all too happy to greenlight a sequel. And that sequel was appropriately titled Batman Returns. This time around, The Dark Knight had to contend with two major villains, the Penguin, played by Danny DeVito, and Catwoman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. It was another solid effort from Burton and company, but something about this one didn't quite work for me. At least not as well as the first movie. And I think it mostly comes down to the villains. Don't get me wrong, I think DeVito did a fine job as the Penguin, although they probably went a little overboard with how grotesque they made the character. And what can I say about Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman but meow. But Nicholson's Joker was a really tough act to follow. I still liked Batman Returns, and audiences did too, but it didn't earn nearly as much money as the first movie. Reportedly, part of that comes from parental complaints that the movie was way too dark and violent. And to that I say, did y'all see the first movie? What the hell did you expect? In any case, Warner Brothers decided to continue the franchise with Batman Forever, but wanted to take it in a more family-friendly direction in response to the complaints. Burton stuck around as a producer, but directing duties were given to Joel Schumacher. Since Michael Keaton didn't want to play Batman without Burton directing, he left the series and was replaced with Val Kilmer. The villains this time around would be Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones, and the Riddler, played by Jim Carrey. Also, after initially appearing in the screenplays for the first two movies but being written out before they went into production, Batman's longtime sidekick, Robin, the Boy Wonder, would finally make an appearance with Chris O'Donnell in the role. I have issues with this movie, and most of them relate to the casting. I don't like Kilmer as Batman, I don't like O'Donnell as, well, anyone really, and Jones is horribly miscast as Two-Face. And how did Harvey Dent suddenly become a white dude after being played by Billy D. Williams in the first movie? The only character that really worked for me was Jim Carrey's Riddler. He was a ton of fun to watch, though I could have done without those ridiculous pajamas he's wearing. I don't think it's a bad movie, but it's a significant step backward from the previous two. Nevertheless, it was a big hit, and Warner Brothers gave Schumacher the green light to direct another Batman movie. And that brings us to the subject of today's review, Batman and Robin. So let's see where it all went wrong. Now, one of the first things that should have tipped us off that something was amiss was the release date. Batman was originally released in June of 1989, Batman Returns in June of 92, Batman Forever in June of 95, and Batman and Robin in June of 97. Uh-oh. Now, it's not like 2 years isn't enough time to make a decent movie, but considering they had a consistent 3-year gap with Returns and Forever, shortening the production time to 2 years was a pretty clear indication that the studio was rushing this one. Another warning sign, Val Kilmer had already signed on to do The Saint, which meant they had to recast Batman yet again. Their choice? George Clooney. Now, I think George Clooney is a fantastic actor. And I know he was a big TV star at the time, and they wanted to have a big name to put on the poster. But at the time, I just could not picture him as Batman. And I know I was not alone. And sure enough, he turned out to be a terrible Batman. But to be fair, this movie was so stupid I don't think anyone could have made a good Batman this time around. They could have brought back Keaton and they still would have found a way to make him suck. Especially with the outfit. Not only were they still somehow unable to design a costume that allowed Batman to turn his head, but both the Batman and Robin suits were now equipped with comically exaggerated nipples, butts, and codpieces. This makes Jim Carrey's Riddler costume look dignified by comparison. Batman also had a brand new Batmobile for this movie, and it is the silliest design yet. Why the hell does it have an open cockpit? One would think multi-millionaire Bruce Wayne could at least afford to put a windshield on that thing, and this is the first movie where Batman has a full-time sidekick, yet it's also the first time the Batmobile is a one-seater. Sorry, Robin, you ain't getting anywhere near this thing. Take the bike. And why, pray tell, is it glowing? Is it supposed to do that?
Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
This is not a vehicle used by a masked crime-fighting vigilante. This is a fucking toy. And that's not by accident. Several members of the cast and crew have stated the studio pretty much wanted a 2-hour toy commercial, and that's exactly what they got. Toy companies were heavily involved in the production, and they cut a year off the production time so they could get the movie and its toys to market as soon as possible. We got toys here, we got toys there, we got toys every fucking where!
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
Well, parents, you wanted them to tone down the violence, and in exchange, you got a bunch of snot-nosed little brats whining and begging you to buy them the latest Batman and Robin action figures. Was it worth it? And of course, if you want to sell Batman and Robin action figures, you gotta have some villains. And this movie has not 1, not 2, but 3 villains. 3. Overkill much? The first of these villains is Mr. Freeze, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. For some reason. Yeah, Arnie is pretty bad in this one, though I'll be the first to admit it's not entirely his fault. I put a good chunk of the blame on the script. There's only so much you can do when your dialogue is composed almost entirely of bad puns. And I know Arnold is the master of bad puns, but this is ridiculous.
The Iceman cometh. Stay cool, chill. Allow me to break the ice. Cool party. Chill to perfection. Let's kick some ice. Freeze in hell, Batman!
Oh, come on, that last one didn't even make sense. If you're not already familiar with the character, Mr. Freeze was once upon a time known as Dr. Victor Freeze, spelled differently, whose wife was suffering from a rare disease that was slowly killing her. So Victor had her cryogenically frozen until he could find a cure. But thanks to an accident in his lab, he now has to keep his body at sub-zero temperatures to survive. He does this using this ridiculous-looking suit, which also appears to have nipples, and the suit is powered by diamonds. I have no idea how that works, and I'm pretty sure the filmmakers don't either. My guess is someone just said, hey, wouldn't it be neat if the suit was powered by diamonds? And that's where the thinking process stopped. The movie begins with Freeze trying to steal a particularly huge diamond from a museum, but Batman and Robin show up to stop him. So Freeze sends out his evil hockey players to take out the dynamic duo. Evil hockey players. I can't believe I just said that. Funny thing happened on the way to the museum. Batman and Robin showed up and a damn hockey game broke out. And that's when I knew it was going to be a long day. This fight scene is pretty terrible. Not only does it feature more wire jumps of doom than I care to count, but they decided to spice it up with some cartoon sound effects. Seriously. And it's not just this scene, it's like that for the entire movie. And that's exactly what Schumacher wanted. While they were filming Batman and Robin, Schumacher would reportedly shout before each take, "Okay everyone, remember, we're making a cartoon." Yeah, funny thing about that, I seem to recall an actual Batman cartoon airing on TV at around the same time. Ah, Batman the Animated Series, one of my favorite shows of all time. And what this show did with the Mr. Freeze character was nothing short of brilliant. When Mr. Freeze, or Mr. Zero as he was originally known, debuted in the Batman comics back in 1959, there wasn't much to the character apart from criminal who freezes shit. But in the Emmy award-winning episode Heart of Ice, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm created a new backstory for the character that made him one of the most popular villains in the Batman franchise. He wasn't just some random thief with an ice fetish. He was Dr. Victor Freeze, a tragic figure who failed to save the life of his terminally ill wife, Nora, nearly killed in an accident and forced to live the rest of his days at sub-zero temperatures, never again able to feel the warmth of the sun or the touch of another human hand. All that remained was a cold, emotionless shell of the man he once was. That's some pretty heavy shit for a kid's show. And it was amazing. Heart of Ice wasn't just a great story, it set the standard for how Mr. Freeze would be handled in the future. This pretty much became the character's official backstory in the comics, as well as other media, like the video game Arkham City. And yes, they also used this story as the basis for Mr. Freeze in Batman and Robin. And they completely fucked it up! This is what really grinds my gears about the movie. They took one of the best villains in the animated series and turned him into a fucking joke. Not only does he have bright blue glowing teeth and a ridiculous outfit, but this is what his hideout looks like. Talk about hiding in plain sight. How have the police not found this place? How has Batman, the world's greatest detective, not found this place? Oh, and it gets worse. He apparently spends his spare time conducting a choir composed of his goons as they sing the Snow Miser song from The Year Without a Santa Claus, while wearing polar bear slippers. What fresh hell is this? And why, I ask you, is the man who can only survive at sub-zero temperatures smoking a cigar? Shouldn't that hurt him? And even with all this silliness, the movie still expects us to take his backstory seriously. You can't have it both ways, Schumacher. Anyway, the first fight with Freeze ends on a pretty stupid note. After briefly flying into space, just go with it, the villain freezes Robin, forcing Batman to give up the chase to thaw out his partner.
I'll kill you next time!
I would kill you now, but I don't know. Actually, hang on. Schumacher! Why am I not killing the Batman? I'm Arnold. Killing is kind of my thing. Haven't you seen my movies? Well, let's get to our other two villains. First, we have Dr. Pamela Isley, played by Uma Thurman, a botanist who is apparently trying to crossbreed plants and animals. Wow, they will hand out research grants for anything. As if her research wasn't weird enough, her laboratory is located inside the most obvious mad scientist lair I've ever seen. But she's not actually the mad scientist. This guy is, and he has created something called Venom, which turns small criminals into huge muscle-bound luchadors that he can sell to foreign warlords. He calls this one Bane. You're all familiar with Bane, aren't you? Well, brace yourselves. You might know him from the comics, or the Arkham games, or his brief appearance in the animated series, and I imagine most of you saw him in The Dark Knight Rises. Well, years before Tom Hardy played the character, this was his first big screen incarnation, and boy was it lame. I don't really have a huge problem with his appearance. He's played by the late Jeep Swenson, a former pro wrestler who definitely had the size and muscle to pull off the character. My problem is, they made him stupid. In other incarnations, Bane was usually quite intelligent, but in Batman and Robin, he's all muscle and no brain. He's only capable of speaking 1 or 2 words at a time. He's like a big, green, roided-up Pokemon. I won't complain as loudly about Bane as I did Mr. Freeze, since I'm not nearly as attached to this character as other fans, but I still know a butchering when I see one. But at least I can't accuse Schumacher of cramming too many personalities into this movie, since Bane doesn't have one. So there's that. Dr. Isley finds out about her boss's evil plans and tells him in no uncertain terms that he's a lunatic and must be stopped. He takes it surprisingly well. But the chemicals he spilled on her had some unintended consequences, and she is reborn as Poison Ivy, a sexy femme fatale with the power to control plant life and a kiss to die for. Literally. Poison Ivy is easily the best villain in the movie. I realize that's not saying much given her competition, but still, She is hamming up her performance big time, of course, but somehow Thurman kinda makes it work. And she definitely has the right look for the part, which is more than I can say for Arnold. But I do have to question her choice of hairstyle later on in the film. It looks like she has an extra set of boobs growing on her head. Even Princess Leia would look at that hair and say, you know what, you're taking it a bit too far. And according to Schumacher, the hair was Thurman's idea, so she has no excuse. Anyway, Poison Ivy has a bone to pick with Bruce Wayne as some of his business ventures are damaging the environment. So she heads to holy cheap disguise, Batman. You have got to be kidding me. Oh yeah, Bane looks totally inconspicuous in that hat and trench coat, doesn't he? I'm sure he'll just blend right in. Then again, if it worked for the Ninja Turtles, I guess it could work for him. Anyway, Ivy, briefly reassuming her identity as Dr. Isley, presents Mr. Wayne with the proposal to help Wayne Enterprises go green. But he spots a few obvious flaws.
No diesel fuel for heat, no coolants to preserve food. Millions of people would die of cold and hunger alone.
Acceptable losses in the battle to save the planet?
Wow. Millions of people would die, and you consider that acceptable losses. Have you considered a career in politics? You'd fit right in. So Bruce politely tells her where she can stick her plans, but the good doctor is not done yet.
Batman and Robin. Militant arm of the warm-blooded oppressors. Animal protectors of the status quo. First, I'll rid myself of the fur and feathered pests. And then Gotham will be mine for the greening.
Who are you talking to? There's no one there! In case that's not enough new characters for you, we have one more to throw in the mix. Alfred's niece Barbara, played by Alicia Silverstone. She's visiting her uncle from England while on break from Oxbridge Academy. Yes, really. Barbara seems like a calm, quiet English girl at first.
Oh, I don't know. All this luxury really isn't my style.
An English girl with no English accent for some reason. But it turns out she has a secret passion for sneaking out at night and participating in Coolio's underground motorcycle races. This nearly gets her killed, but fortunately Dick followed her to the race and saves her from plummeting into this terrible green screen effect.
So this is where you hang out.
Hey, Mr. Freeze has enough puns on his own. We don't need your help. After Dick saves her life, Barbara reveals she didn't just come here to pay Uncle Alfred a visit.
I'm gonna take him away from this dismal life of servitude.
Barbara, have you looked around with your eyes? Because it looks to me like Alfred is living a pretty good life. He's better off than I am, I'll tell you that. But apparently, Alfred is not as well off as we think. In fact, he's suffering from something called McGregor syndrome and is slowly dying. Or at least that's what they claim. Personally, I think he's just trying to find a quick way out of this movie. And I do not blame him. Well, let's get back to our villains. After Poison Ivy establishes her own hideout in an abandoned Turkish bath, which was previously inhabited by some radioactive juggalos, she sets her sights on the dynamic duo who are attending a charity fundraiser. This would be the same Batman that used to operate in the shadows. Now he's making public appearances. Does he do autograph signings too? Ivy uses some kind of pheromone dust to make both Batman and Robin fall in love with her, hoping that it will make them fight each other. And it might have worked if Mr. Freeze hadn't crashed the party, forcing our heroes to put aside the lady for another fight sequence. And more cartoon sound effects. God damn it, Joel. Despite putting a kink in her plans, Ivy sees potential in Freeze and offers to team up with him to take out Batman and Robin. This is a really weird team-up if you think about it. It might appear to make sense on the surface. They both have a common enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The problem is, Ivy wants to wipe out mankind so plants can take over the world, while Mr. Freeze basically wants to usher in a new ice age, which is not exactly the healthiest environment for plant life. And yet somehow their obviously conflicting goals do not stop them from working together. What am I missing here? Well, anyway, Robin is still suffering from the effects of Ivy's pheromone dust and has been driven into a jealous rage, turning the boy Wonder into the boy Whiner.
How are we supposed to work together if you won't trust me? It's your house, it's your rules. I mean, it's your way or the highway. I want a Robin signal in the sky, all right? You got some real issues with women, you know that? She loves me and not you, and it's driving you crazy. You just couldn't stand it. She was gonna kiss me and not you. I'm tired of living in your shadow. This is no partnership.
Jeez, what a dick. In more ways than one. Robin is definitely one of the more annoying parts of this movie, even more so than Mr. Freeze's puns. And that's saying something. He's constantly bitching and moaning and whining, and I can't imagine why anyone thought it would go over well. Schumacher has stated that he wanted to create some conflict between Batman and Robin to make the movie more interesting. But it ended up being more irritating than anything. And was it really necessary? They're already fighting 3 supervillains. Do they really need to fight each other too? Bruce is also having trouble getting Ivy off his mind. In fact, it's so bad that it's distracting him from his dinner date with his girlfriend. And considering his girlfriend is Ella McPherson, that's quite remarkable. And then this happens.
Who's Ivy?
What?
You just called me Ivy.
I have watched that scene more times than I care to count, and no, he didn't. I know the production was rushed, but how did nobody catch that? While that nonsense is going on, Barbara decides to hack into Alfred's computer, for some reason. I guess this is what she does in her spare time when her bike is in the shop? After figuring out the incredibly easy password, nice job, Alfie, she finds her way into the Batcave where she is greeted by Max Alfredrum, and Uncle Alfred just happened to prepare a crime-fighting suit for her in case she found her way down there. How goddamn convenient. Naturally, it is also equipped with exaggerated ass and nipples, along with a pair of high heels. And as everybody knows, those are the most appropriate shoes to wear during hand-to-hand combat. Or when running from a T-Rex. Meanwhile, the villains are hard at work putting their despicable plans into effect. Mr. Freeze plans to turn a telescope into a huge freeze ray that will turn Gotham City into a glacier. I have no idea how that works, and at this point I don't care. And Poison Ivy plans to, well, poison Batman and Robin. Fortunately, they finally wisened up to her plans, and with a little help from this mysterious newcomer who calls herself Batgirl, they kick Ivy's ass.
Curses!
Curses?
But just who is this costume chick who suddenly joined the party?
Bruce, it's me, Barbara.
What? Wow, Barbara, I never would have guessed it was you. I mean, that costume just covers up your cheekbones so well. So now it's time to go after Mr. Freeze, although they apparently have to stop and get some new vehicles and change costumes first. Oh sure, he's about to kill millions of people, but take your time. Make sure you're appropriately dressed. Besides, gotta sell those toys. And after an extremely convoluted action sequence, they stop Mr. Freeze, shrink Bane back down to his normal size, save some people from another bad green screen effect, and all is well in Gotham City. And wouldn't you know it, Mr. Freeze just happened to be carrying the cure for McGregor syndrome since his wife was suffering from the same thing. And if you're wondering why he didn't just use the cure on his wife, they do actually explain this. Nora Freeze had a more advanced stage of the disease for which there currently is no cure, but Alfred, on the other hand, was still in the early stages, so he could be cured. Although he looked like he was pretty much at death's door, so I'm not sure how he's still in the early stages. Why am I trying to make sense of this? So they give Alfred the cure, and Robin changes back into his red costume for some reason, and sure enough, Alfred recovers and our 3 heroes are ready for their next big adventure. Oh, wait, no, that didn't happen. The studio was actually planning to do a 5th film called Batman Triumphant with the Scarecrow as the villain, but Batman and Robin was such a huge box office disappointment that they scrapped plans for that film and hit the reset button in 2005 with Batman Begins. And honestly, that was the right move. Batman and Robin had far too many problems, and there was just no way the franchise was going to recover. The only real bright spot in this movie is Michael Gough, who played Alfred Pennyworth in all 4 Batman films. He delivers another great performance here, and I genuinely felt bad for the character when he fell ill. But that's about it. Overall, the acting is terrible, the heroes are stupid, the villains are lame, the fight scenes are just silly, and the special effects do not hold up well. Many moviegoers were dissatisfied with the movie, and to his credit, Joel Schumacher has accepted responsibility for that. As far as he's concerned, there's no point in blaming anyone else. He agreed to direct it, so ultimately the movie's success or failure is on him. And I definitely respect him for that. He's been much better at handling criticism than certain other filmmakers I could mention. So I will give him credit for that. But no credit for the movie itself. It sucks. But at least this Batman wasn't a delusional psychopath who killed indiscriminately and had enough nightmares to fill an entire mental health conference, so I suppose it could have been worse. Next time, we're going to look at a movie that is truly outrageous. There, was the hint obvious enough this time? So I'll see you all in the next video. Same bat time, same bat channel.
I hate when people talk during the movie.